Hello divas, welcome back to the Other Girls Club podcast. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all your lovely messages, comments, everything last week. Obviously last week was a very specifically sad episode. We discussed the passing of Daisy and everything, and it was really nice actually to have that space where I feel like I could really talk about that in depth and get it off my chest and then move on content wise, because it's so weird as a content creator where like obviously you have like specific niches and things that you talk about, right? But like so much of your personal life is intertwined with your work. So it was really weird to even think about making content when there was this huge thing in my personal life that like I hadn't spoken about in depth yet. So yeah, just thank you for being so lovely and understanding and everything like that. And I feel really good coming back today. I'm feeling, do you know what, even though it has been a shitty week, I'm recording this episode the day that the announcements have come out about the government's slashing of PIP and also other welfare disability benefits. So even though it is a particularly hard, specifically for disabled people, it's a particularly hard day and week, I'm personally feeling quite good and I'm feeling quite charged up. Pissed the fuck off, don't get me wrong, I am pissed off, but I feel in a good space to like, yeah, tackle these issues. Because last week I was a mess, and the week before that actually as well, but we're getting there personally in my own personal life. But on a wider scale, in this country, and to be fair, so many other countries right now, it is a fucking shit show. And I feel like so many episodes I've come on this podcast and I've been just like, I'm scared about the world, I'm scared about the future, and sometimes I feel like, oh, am I fear-mongering? Am I, you know, like, you just, like, overthinking things too much? And then I see things like this happen, and I'm like, no, it's a scary fucking time to be alive. It's also a particularly scary time to be alive if you are part of a marginalised group like the disabled community. So I did actually have a whole other episode topic planned for today. We're going to talk about the Pretty Little Thing rebrand and yeah, just that whole kind of fucked up scenario. I want to touch on that, but I would be absolutely remiss. I cannot come on this podcast this week and not address the Labour government and the strain and the terror they are putting on under disabled people. So of course we're going to have a little chat about that, but just know that this isn't a full discussion. We will probably touch on it again later, but I just can't come on the podcast this week, even though it's come out today and, you know, it's a developing case. I can't not mention it. The whole situation is just so entirely, to me, it's so unnecessarily cruel. And specifically as well, Keir Starmer, who... do not get me started on that man. But Keir Starmer coming out and saying that the welfare cuts are not a financial issue but a moral one. A moral one. You think this is a moral issue to make disabled people's lives, specifically disabled people's lives, harder. You think that's a moral issue, not a financial one. And the thing is around stats and figures is they don't add up to the fear that they are trying to drum up in society about disabled people. And it's the same for any marginalised group that they try to specifically scapegoat, because that's exactly what they're doing, right? They're scapegoating disabled people because times are fucking desperate and because the Tories dug this hole over a decade long term of austerity, and instead of taxing billionaires and instead of being harsher on corporations, they're going to be absolutely spineless and they are going to continue to scapegoat some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And it has been disabled people for a while, but there's clearly a specific agenda against disabled people right now, and they've done the same to immigrants, they've done the same to LGBT people, particularly trans people as well. But all of this fear-mongering doesn't add up to the statistics. Like, if we look at PIP specifically, right, DWP, the demons themselves, they reported last year that PIP fraud sits at less than 1%. Less than 1%. To have less than 1% fraud is insane. And it is at less than 1% because the current structure and the current system of PIP does not work in disabled people's favour. Some of the interviews that are coming out and that people are giving about and people that claim it are so terrifying because it's so misinformed. People just seem to think that if you have a diagnosis, you get PIP. Say like, oh, if you have ADHD, you get a car, or if you have autism, you get a car. And no, I know people who are severely disabled. I know people who are amputees who have been denied PIP. It's not just a case of getting a diagnosis and getting PIP. There is a whole process behind it which is so dehumanising, and it's not built for real world application. It is actually so hard to get PIP. So the Labour Party are right. Yeah, the current system of PIP does not work, but it doesn't work for disabled people, and the plans that they are suggesting make it harder. And also as well, I feel like everyone is focusing on PIP when it comes to this announcement, which obviously absolutely needs its attention and needs to be a discussion, because what is being done to PIP is, first of all, PIP is already cruel, we've discussed that, but what is being done with the PIP changes is fundamentally cruel. But also the changes that they are making to other welfare benefits and specifically other disability benefits, because yes, people who claim PIP will also be affected by this in an atrocious manner. It's going to be horrible. It's going to ruin people's lives. And the thing is, and the PIP process has already killed people. It has. Like, there are so many cases that you can Google right now of people being killed off because they are not getting the right benefits. They are not getting PIP when they need it, when they need that help, when they need that support. I will never get that heartbreaking case of that man who was deemed fit to work, and he died not soon after that, and he only weighed 36 kilograms when he died. He was so ill. It is a fundamentally flawed and cruel system as it is, and they are making it even worse. And I think what's disgusting is the fact that they are disguising it as, we want to help disabled people get back to work. We're here to help people, and support will be given to those who really need it. But they're defining who really needs it on a commercial basis, not by who actually needs the help and support. It's who they actually think is worthy of the money, which, by the way, is going to be a minuscule amount of people. With the you have to have 4 points now in one single category. That means that there will be people who can't go to the bathroom unassisted. There will be people who cannot feed themselves, people who cannot get dressed without assistance, who will not qualify for this. That's disgusting. That is absolutely vile, and I don't know how these people go to sleep at night, and I don't know how they can justify this. And also as well, the Labour MP who announced it had such vim in her voice. Like, how can you stand there and be so aggressive and so passionate about ruining disabled people's lives? I do not get it. And these people, like, especially when you look at politicians as well, like politician I really love, and everyone knows this, is Jeremy Corbyn. I've always been an admirer of Jeremy Corbyn and his work. He's so passionate about helping people in this country and even beyond, but also like his community specifically as well. And you think, like, that's the kind of person that should be going into politics to help people. And his track record when it comes to voting and his track record when it comes to politics aligns with the things that he says. And then you've got people like this who have taken what is supposed to be the party for the workers, the party for the people, and they are making it a party for the corporation. And I think what makes it, there are so many things that make it even more vile, I keep saying that, but something that is really not sitting right with me as well is there are so many people who voted Labour in last year's election because they were fed up of Tory austerity. Understandably, rightfully so. You know, I have proudly never ever voted Tory, never aligned with the Tories. I've always been very, very anti-Tory. And there were a lot of people who voted Labour in hopes of giving them a better chance of rebuilding the country, because people were tired and people were tired of being exploited. And then Labour come in and they don't act the way a Labour Party. They come in and they're specifically making it harder for marginalised groups and for the working people. And I think that is just so evil as well, because we know what the Tory party are, right? We know who they are, we know who they operate. They're a grim party. But Labour Party coming in, and they could have been the beacon of hope for people who have really been taken advantage of and who have really been fucked over by the Tories, and they come in and they do this. It's not even been a year since they've been in power and they're already doing this. I personally didn't vote Labour in last year's election, which is wild because I have voted Labour previously in every election before, in both local and general elections, but I couldn't because I did not have faith or trust in Keir Starmer. I could not vote for that man, and the only thing that is bringing me solace is knowing that I did not give that man my vote. But there are people that gave that man their vote because they had hope in just something else, you know? I think that's just so cruel that there were so many people who were hoping this could be a chance to get the Tories out, and this can be a chance to move forward with the country and actually support the people of this country. But no, it's not. And I really do feel so much sympathy for those people who gave the Labour Party their vote in hopes of a better future, and Labour have turned around and given them a slap in the face. I think it's absolutely vile. Like, if you'd have told me in 2017 that there's going to be a government in power and they are making the lives of disabled people harder and you absolutely hate them, let me tell you now, I would not have said it would be the Labour Party. And I'm not saying the Labour Party before Keir was this glistening perfect party, because it absolutely wasn't. Like, come on, like, let's look at, you know, Tony Blair. But I just had so much hope in the Corbyn years, you know. Being at uni in that time, I had so much hope. I really did. And then everything kind of went down the shitter after that, really. And I'm not sitting there being like, you know, I'm not like a Corbynite, he's a perfect man and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things he got wrong, don't get me wrong. But the one thing that man did was give me hope, and he gave me something to believe in. And now I do feel actually very sorry for a lot of young people, younger than me even. I know I'm still fairly young, but even people younger than me who look to politics. And who do you look to inspire you, you know? Because it's so uninspiring. It is so uninspiring. And I think that really is the saddest thing of it all, is that there will be so many kids, a lot of working class kids, a lot of marginalised kids who could be really great in politics, but they might look to current political landscape. First of all, they don't see themselves represented in it. They don't see anyone that looks like them. They don't see anyone that comes from their background. Oh, and when they do, they have to turn on their morals, they have to turn on where they came from to get anywhere. Because don't think it went amiss that I saw Miss Angela Rayner sitting behind that witch yesterday nodding along. I'm absolutely disgusted. Absolutely disgusted. Miss Angela Rayner. Someone that people hold up as their working class queen, and oh, how nice is it to see her in this position. Yes, it's lovely, but you still happily sit there on that bench and you will nod along, knowing, and she will know, that this is going to destroy disabled people's lives. How vile. How absolutely vile. But last thing I want to say on this topic, because I actually will just sit here and talk about it all the whole fucking day, but I do want to get onto other things, is obviously we are, for good reason, talking about how devastating the PIP cuts are, but there are also other cuts that are going to be so catastrophic for other people, like the other welfare cuts, the other disability benefits cuts. The fact that they're making it that you can't claim certain benefits until you are 22. Like, because we all know that, you know, disability and health conditions don't kick in till you're 22. Oh, of course. Of course. It's fucking ridiculous. It's just absolutely without common sense. And they know that. They know that. But also as well, like, disabled people deserve access, dignity and respect, even if they can't work, even if they can't contribute to capitalism. Because obviously PIP, and they don't treat it like one, but PIP is not meant to be an out of work benefit. It is meant to be a benefit which pays for their extra cost of being disabled, which, by the way, it does not do that. It already doesn't cover the extra costs, and they want to freeze PIP so that it doesn't rise with inflation, and they want to make sure less people can get it. Fucking brilliant. Amazing. And it's so ironic because they keep going on about getting more disabled people into work. This is going to make more disabled people unemployed and unable to work. But also, if there are disabled people who simply cannot work, like there are some disabled people who cannot work and they'll never work, they deserve access, dignity and respect. And the worth of disabled people's lives should not be based on what they can contribute to capitalism. And unfortunately, I think we see that with a lot of human rights movements. They, like, for example, if we look at the LGBTQ plus rights movement, a lot of that has been closely aligned, and Pride has been closely aligned with capitalism. And we always talk about how it's been pink washed. And I think we haven't seen that with disability on as a big of scale, is because disability is harder to intertwine and to make palatable to capitalism. Like, they still do it to some degree, but we don't see it as much. It's just fucking awful, man, honestly. And my heart really does break for the really the most vulnerable people within the disabled community. I think it's so vile, and I will, and I really mean this, I will never forgive the Labour Party for this, and I don't know if I could ever vote Labour again. And I will also be keeping a very close eye on those around me and those that I look to in terms of who protests, who speaks out against this. I will really, really not forget people who took a stance against this, because its impact on the disabled community is going to be absolutely catastrophic. And I remember saying, literally just in a few episodes ago, the one I did with Lucy Dawson, which, by the way, I'm glad you guys loved that, because I'm really fucking proud of that episode. Self-produced, who? Oh, it was a cracker of an episode. But there was a point... There was a point I made in that episode where I said, like, there are so many people, non-disabled people, who will be happy to watch the Paralympics and share inspiring clips and cry at like videos of disabled kids and stuff like that. But when it comes to actually protesting for disabled rights, and when it comes to learning But then when it comes to learning about structural issues like the housing crisis and how it affects disabled people, and learning about PIP and taking a stance against that, they don't want to know. And to be honest, I have absolutely no time for people who, even people who follow me, right? If you only follow me because you want to see inspiring stories about how I, in brackets, quote unquote, overcome my disability, and you want inspiration porn, but you are turned off when I talk about all of these issues, I don't want you following me. I don't. And I've got zero time for people who are happy and I've got zero time for people who are happy to cheer and jump and cry when the Paralympics comes on, but they'll turn the news over when we're talking about disabled issues and disabled rights and these very issues we're seeing this week. I've got zero time for those people. It's very, very scary times ahead indeed, and I just send so much love, support, and solidarity with the rest of the disabled community, and I really call upon a lot of people who would consider themselves allies to take a stance against this, because the disabled community aren't helpless. God knows we have fought, and the community has fought for all of the rights that we have. That's another point, right? Oh my god, I'm never going to stop talking. This would have to be a longer episode, but there's this kind of narrative going around. I hate the phrase, a voice for the voiceless. And it's to make people who take a stance politically and whatnot to feel good about themselves. But the truth of it is, disabled people are not voiceless. If you don't know anything about the disability rights movements, and particularly here in the UK back in the 90s as well, I really do implore you to just go Google that today and have a read about that and look at some of those images, because they're so powerful. And these I'm going to say brave, because they are brave disabled people chaining themselves to bus and putting traffic to a stop in the middle of Westminster, of all fucking places. I even hate crossing the road there, let alone chaining myself to a bus, you know. And it's disabled people who've got us our rights, not kind, do-gooding non-disabled people. Don't get me wrong, non-disabled people were a crucial part to the movement, yes, and we do need the support and the allyship of non-disabled people, but let's not get it twisted that disabled people don't fight our own battles as well, because that is a narrative that goes round. And I think when the government are really trying to fuel this fire of this narrative that disabled people are lazy and we're grifters and we're faking it to claim all this money, which, by the way, don't fucking exist. Like, please, come on. It's not worth it. But when that narrative is being drawn, we need to counteract it with these images of disabled people being relentless activists. We're being relentless advocates and fighting our own battles and, really being the opposite of what we're made out to be. Right, let's talk about this Pretty Little Thing rebrand then, shall we? Because what does the Pretty Little Thing rebrand and the disability welfare cuts have in common? Late stage capitalism, baby. Late stage capitalism seems to be the theme of all my solo episodes. So, if you guys missed it, Pretty Little Thing, the British UK fast fashion brand, ultra fast fashion brand, had a rebrand a couple of weeks ago, and they have gone from being, I would describe Pretty Little Thing as being almost like a party wear brand. Like, when I think of Pretty Little Thing, I think of cheap next day delivery. People have forgot to get something for a birthday party or something like that. You see a lot of like young girls wearing it, and it's very much like it's very much like cheap dupes of things the Kardashians wore in the 2010s. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking like skin tight like dresses, and that almost sort of like, someone called it like BBL fashion, which, to be fair, such a read, because I mean, it is like a lot of their models as well were of the very kind of like BBL sort of like body type, and they did have an alleged, you ain't taking me to court today, baby, you cannot trick me, I'm not going to court, alleged history of allegedly stealing designs from smaller designers, and namely smaller POC black designers. So a lot of their fashion was quite, I'd look at some designs and it kind of felt like cheap knockoffs of like black designers, and like it really did have a hand in appropriating black culture to the masses, I would say. And it kind of went hand in hand with that 2010s and late 2010s era of the Kardashians. I really do associate it with that, and I think the two are intrinsically linked, if not actually linked. I feel like their effect and their impact and where it stems from is intrinsically linked, even if the two aren't actually linked in the issue. But Pretty Little Thing have a rebrand, and they've ditched that aesthetic. I think they teased it on like their website, and I think they shut their website down. They cleared their Instagram, like, come on, 2017 Taylor Swift style, and they were like, there's a rebrand coming. So everyone was like, okay, should be interesting. They come out with their new Instagram post, and first thing you see is like an italic new font, a completely new font, and it is Pretty Little Thing in italics. And I think the new tagline is like, a legacy in the making, or the building of a legacy, or something like that. So that's the first thing I saw, and then I went to their stories, which was funny because I don't actually follow them, but I was like taking a deep dive that morning. Went to their stories, and I saw some of the new images that they were putting out, so like the photo shoot images that they were putting out of this rebrand, and it was just such an eye roll moment for me, because it was your very typical, they were just switching to, because it just became very, very clear from the offset that they were ditching this kind of like cheap party wear kind of like aesthetic, and they were switching over to old money. Which, I'm sorry, I just never thought I'd be saying the words Pretty Little Thing and old money in the same sentence. That just ain't right. That don't roll. I know that I struggle to speak sometimes, my Essex accent, but that don't roll off the tongue. That don't sit well with me. But we are, and we have been for a while, in a resurgence and a rise of the old money aesthetic. And if you don't really know what the old money aesthetic is, I can say it can really most be described by, I would say, quite... Now, I think to finish this episode, I'm going to need my permission to be mean card. I need you to give it to me, because I don't think I can make the points that I want to make without being a little bit mean. So do I have my permission to be mean? Can I have my permission to be mean card, please? Because I cannot do this episode without being a little bit mean. I'm sorry. Let's all put our big girl pants on and let's get a little bit mean. But I think the old money aesthetic can only be described as quite plain, quite boring. Think creams, think tennis wear, think workwear, think Hailey Bieber. Think Hailey Bieber, think Sophia Richie, think that kind of aesthetic. Or like quite simple like jewellery as well, gold jewellery. Very quiet luxury. That has been a big trend on socials in the last couple of years. Very like what people think is a subtle indicator of wealth. Because let's not get this wrong, this is not a modern thing. Throughout history, people have wanted to indicate at their wealth. And I actually did a video essay on YouTube about this a couple of years ago, which I'd really recommend viewing. It's one of my first videos, so the audio isn't amazing, like, sorry about that, but the content, I spent months researching that. It is such a good video, if I do say so myself, and I wish it had better audio quality, but it's alright, you'd have to turn it up. But the whole video that I made is basically about how we don't want to be beautiful, we want to indicate and symbolise wealth. And in the video I go on to talk about how beauty standards change throughout history, and also how they massively changed after the slave trade and the slave trade's impact on our beauty standards. Really recommend that video, and actually I will link that in the description of this podcast. But before the slave trade, being fat was actually an indicator of wealth, because it indicated that you could afford food and that you could afford to be indulgent. And then after the slave trade, when there was a lot more demonisation of black bodies and black female bodies in particular, those features which are heavily associated with African women became undesirable. And it was now an indicator of wealth to be slim. And there was also other factors in there as well, particularly with America, because you had different religious movements rising at the time. But the point of it is, with the Pretty Little Thing rebrand is, and the old money and the quiet luxury is, it is designed to be a false indicator of wealth. And I specifically say a false indicator of wealth because it's not wealth. Like, what people are cosplaying is old traditional money, and specifically old traditional conservative English money. We're talking like generational wealth. We're talking like people who's got 15 generations going to Oxford. But suddenly, over the last few years, people have been wanting to cosplay that more. And I feel like we've seen it a lot in our big public figures, like Hailey Bieber and Sophia Richie have been a big... Sophia Richie, Lionel Richie's daughter, has been a big fashion inspo for a lot of girls. Which, by the way, this is going to be mean, but I just don't get it. I don't get it. I think a lot of these girls, they're absolutely beautiful, stunning. I'm not disputing that. It's not about that. But look, if they're comfortable in what they're wearing, hats off to them. But I just think it's so boring. It's so boring. Why is quiet luxury so boring? And everyone's wearing it. Everyone's dressed like a fucking CEO these days. Nobody wants to serve cunt anymore. Like, come on. What happened to just serving pussy, you know? Like, nobody wants to serve cunt anymore. No brands want to serve cunt. No brands want to, like, actually make clothes which have personality. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it pisses me off. Me and my friend Lana went out shopping. It was really funny because we were out on, like a bar crawl. And, when you're out and you're a bit drunk, I don't know if you guys just get the urge to, like, go to a beauty counter and spend some money. So we did. And then we ended up going to a few clothes shops as well. And all the clothes were so fucking boring. They were all of this false, quiet luxury nonsense. And we were just like, where is the personality, you know? But the point that I'm making is that this aesthetic, it's not true money. It's not true old money. It's cosplaying. Because the reality is, these garments are so fucking cheap to make. And they're so fucking cheap to make because they use exploitative labour and cheap materials. Like, Pretty Little Thing are talking about, a rebrand, building a legacy. How about you rebrand your working practices? Because the legacy that you're currently building and have been building for a while is one of exploitation. And I'm not ashamed to admit, right, I didn't really know what fast fashion was until, I would say, way too late. I didn't really have a grasp on what fast fashion was until maybe late 2020 or 2021. I knew about unethical practices within the fashion industry and within, garment making and stuff like that. But I didn't really quite grasp fast fashion and its impact on the environment, its impact on its workers, obviously, and just how exploitative it was, and just the absolute scale of it. I don't think I had any grasp on that. And then when I did, I was just like shocked, and I realised how much fast fashion I had been consuming. And I'm not going to sit here and act like a saint, act like I don't consume fast fashion, because I do. I have really tried to, in the last few years, adjust my consumption habits in general outside of fashion. As someone especially as well who loves fashion, who loves styling, it's important for me, I personally, but also as an influencer as well, to limit, I think, my consumption habits and to limit how much I consume and how much I'm buying. But also as well, on a personal level, when you're just going onto a fast fashion website, a fast fashion app, because that's the thing, the apps make all of this consumption so much more, because they make it feel like daily content and they make it feel like part of your daily routine to go onto an app, and I think that's very, very deliberate. But I think it's so important for me as someone who is interested in fashion, not just because of the morality and the ethics behind it, and also like the finances behind it as well, because like sometimes you don't realise you're spending hundreds every month on fashion, but also as well to practice that individuality and to maintain your own personal style, because as I have like clearly expressed, I find a lot of what fast fashion is putting out very boring. But if you get into a habit of just consuming and wearing what is served to you, like if you're one of your say you've got a fashion influencer that you really like, and you just shop whatever they put on through their link. And some of these fashion influencers, this is not about anyone in specific, this is just about the industry as a whole. I see some girls who will post like hauls every week, and it's just wild to me, because first of all, I'm like, where do you put everything? You know, like where do these girls, these fashion girlies who do hauls every week, where do they put all their clothes? I don't get it. But also as well, we know how they afford it. They probably write it off as tax because they class it as work as well if they're self-employed. And also a lot of them do send it. That's another thing. That was a bit of a scandal, wasn't it, a few months ago? Was it Nasty Gal or Nasty Gal? Nasty Gal, or one of the fast fashion brands did put out a statement saying like, you will only be allowed to return so many clothes, because there are so many people who are just ordering so much and like just returning it. And part of that is fashion influencers basically ordering, making the content and sending back, which awful because it just goes into landfill the majority of the time anyway. It's people who can't get their size right, because sizing in fast fashion is so atrocious, and in women's fashion in general, to be honest, so they have to order multiple size in order to find out what works for them. But there's so many moving parts to this whole topic. But on the specifics of why has Pretty Little Thing done this rebrand in the first place, I mean, this is all alleged, this is all just my sort of thoughts and feelings and theories. But I personally think the Pretty Little Thing rebrand is very deliberate, and I don't think it's just because of a change in vision. And I do not think it is simple as, oh, this is a new trend, this is a new fashion trend, this aligns with our brand. First of all, I do think the thing that absolutely cannot be ignored is the rise in the far right and the rise in conservatism that we are seeing across the world. It is really scary, and I've spoken about this a lot, about how we are seeing a rise in the far right and we're going back to more conservative traditional values, and you can see this across industries, not in fashion, but we have been seeing it a lot in fashion. And with a rise in conservatism, beauty ideals change with that. So we all know about the consumption of Ozempic, and how many more people have been using Ozempic over the years, and how we've all spoken about how thin is back, thin is in. That is intrinsically linked to the rise in conservatism, because the rise in conservatism hasn't just happened with Donald Trump getting into power, like a lot of people are sort of implying that it is. The rise in conservatism has been happening for many, many years. And I noticed this a few years ago when I started to see more fashion girlies like Hailey Bieber and like Sophie Richie come to the forefront of fashion. When we started to see, it became more obvious then when we started to see a rise in tradwife culture, and some tradwife culture content, right, some conservative content, can sometimes be so subtle. It can sometimes just be a video of a woman in a beautiful, flowy, fairy-esque, folklore even-esque dress, and she might just be baking bread from scratch, and that is... Oh, this is so interesting. I'd love to do a full episode on this, but it's also so intrinsic to this topic. But there are a lot of women who are being red-pilled, right? Like, we know men are being red-pilled and they're being indoctrinated by people like Andrew Tate, but it's also happening to women, because there are some more conservative tradwife influencers out there who are creating content like this, which on a surface level looks really appealing. Like, why would you not find wearing a beautiful dress and baking bread and baking cakes appealing? Like, that's appealing to me, and I don't even like cooking and baking, and I'm definitely not conservative. And then you scratch the surface on these influencers who put out this content, and it gets slowly more and more conservative. They start to talk out against things like vaccines, against if you're in America, it's like Planned Parenthood, is that what it's called? Yes. About contraceptions, about abortions, things like this. And there are a lot of very conservative ideals underneath this content which just looks very aesthetic. All of these are indicators in the rise of conservatism. How does this relate to Pretty Little Thing? Well, when you have a brand like Pretty Little Thing, which is entirely based off trend culture, you have to move with that rise in conservatism. It doesn't matter whether you align with it or not, it doesn't matter if it fits the brand, you have to move where the movement goes, because that brand solely relies on being on trend. And Pretty Little Thing had garments within their whole range, which, by the way, absolutely massive. The amount of products these fast fashion brands actually have on their website is insane. I think to be classed technically as a fast fashion brand, you have to release so many products like a week or a month or something. But the amount of products Pretty Little Thing have on their website is absolutely insane. So some of the garments that they did have already did fit this aesthetic. But in order for the brand to be seen in that light, or they're hoping for the brand to be seen in that light and to align with that trend, it did require a full rebrand, because the image of what people think of when you say Pretty Little Thing was so unaligned with this current trend of quiet luxury and old money. And because Pretty Little Thing as a brand, as a company, because they see things at such surface level, and because we are so trend and aesthetic focused, so they're doing all of these things that align their brand to be more within this current trend. And those things include obviously the italic logo, but also they're using, I would say, slimmer models. They're also using more white models, which is very interesting considering the brand was allegedly built so much of allegedly stealing from black designers and black culture. They are doing all of these little things to try and trick the consumer into thinking that they are buying into luxury, when they are absolutely not. They are not buying quality luxury products. They are still buying Pretty Little Thing. But unfortunately, for a lot of consumers, it doesn't actually matter about what they're buying. They don't actually really want to buy luxury. They want to buy something that makes them feel like they are giving, they are serving, they are cosplaying luxury. There's also a few other reasons why I think this rebrand has come about. So obviously there is the massive, we've just spoke about, rising conservatism, but there is also as well, we cannot deny that we are in a cost of living crisis and people are struggling. So whenever you have any kind of, economic dip, whenever you have some kind of financial crisis, people do want to display their wealth in ways that they can. But obviously people can't shop as much, people don't have as much disposable income. And so something that you often see when there is an economic dip is in terms of specifically the garments, clothing that brands make, they start to produce more workwear, and workwear becomes more of a trend. And you saw this a lot in the 2000s and like previous eras as well, is that people start to buy more workwear because they can't afford to buy as many outfits and as many clothes for separate occasions. And because the brands know this, and because they see the trends coming, and because they see the economic dip, what they'll do is they'll make workwear outerwear as well. They'll incorporate workwear into more people's wardrobes, and sometimes they'll label it as things like capsule wardrobe, or they'll try and spin the aesthetic so that it makes someone look like girl bossy. And don't get me wrong, there are some brands who generally this is their aesthetic and that's what they want to create because that's what the brand is generally based on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that when it comes to times of economic crisis and economic dips and financial struggles, you do often see brands start to produce more workwear. One, because people can't afford to buy multiple outfits, and two, because it does help people, even if they are economically and financially struggling, it does help people cosplay that kind of boss culture. Like, you might be in your overdraft, but you can still dress like a force CEO. And that's not new. That's not new. That has been a well-known trend within the fashion industry for a while. But what I do find so funny about this is I don't think these brands like Pretty Little Thing, I don't think they pull it off. Like, because what they class as workwear would not fly in an office. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, I didn't see all of it, but I caught the tail end of the discourse, as they say, the other week or a few days ago. And there was a woman who apparently had a very young woman who had like a 6-figure job, landed a really good position, and followed the office siren trend, and actually went to the office dressed within that trend and lost her job. That is absolutely insane. And that goes back to the point that I was literally just making about how I don't think these fast fashion brands are doing this kind of like workwear trend well, because the pieces that they're creating are like the kind of pieces, with all peace and love, no shade, influencers would wear when they want to look like CEOs. Like they would wear when they want to look like they're going to the office, when in reality they might be working down the coffee shop or recording a podcast. It's like the girl bossification of workwear, but it's not suitable for an office. Like, you'll see some of the pieces where it might be like a plunging neckline dress with like a bubble hem skirt, and it's like no one is wearing that to the office. And then also, like, where are you wearing that? Where are you wearing that, period? You know? So it's so funny to me to watch these fast fashion brands try to follow this practice that brands do when there's an economic crisis, and they don't even do it right, because they have no brand identity and they have no awareness, and they're so used to just following trends. And a lot of them are built for just photo shoots and influencers. And this leads nicely onto another point that I have about these fast fashion brands, like Pretty Little Thing as well, which is, look, there are a number of reasons why you should either not purchase or should reduce your purchasing of these brands. Because look, when I'm saying all of this, absolutely no shade, no hate to people who cannot afford to shop sustainably. And I think that's a very important point to make, that there are a lot of people who have to shop fast fashion because it's their only option. There are people who are severely disabled, who cannot get out to the shops and cannot try on clothes, who cannot shop in any other way. There are also people who are on lower incomes, people who have no income at all, who need to shop these options, whether that is like Pretty Little Thing, Primark, etc. Absolutely no shade to these people. When I'm talking about our consumption habits and stuff like that, I am very much more worried and entirely concerned with influencers who are doing these just gorge, I don't know what the word is, like these huge hauls, like weekly, bi-weekly. They're buying so much and they're encouraging people to think that these shopping habits are normal. That is where my concerns lay, not with people who are shopping fast fashion because they have no other option. But back to what I was saying, there are so many reasons why you shouldn't shop fast fashion if you have the option not to, or why you should reduce your fast fashion intake, which is what I have been trying to do over the last few years. I've been trying to do it in a way like I just don't shop as much. I might get something from ASOS when, like, every few months, to say, like, there have been times over the last few years where, like, my body has changed in, like, weight and shape and size and whatever, and, like, ASOS has really only been like a viable option for me because they do have a bigger size range than a lot of sustainable brands. Also a very good point, a lot of sustainable brands only really stock quite a small size range. So I mainly try to limit my fast fashion habits by not shopping as much, but also shopping sustainably where I can. But all of those ethical and moral reasons why you shouldn't aside, also, just as someone who is passionate about fashion and about style, it really just goes to show how little integrity these brands have in terms of their brand identity. And look, we know brands follow trends. That's a very common business practice. Like, and I know people will be like, well, Sophie, that's how business works. You know, you follow the market, you follow the trends, yada, yada, yada. But, like, I'm sorry, fashion should be more than that. I think of a designer that I absolutely love. One of my favourite designers, certainly my favourite British designer, is Vivienne Westwood. Now, you might not be massively into fashion. You might not know a lot about it. You might not care about it. That's absolutely fine. But I think if I said to you, Vivienne Westwood, you would have some kind of idea of what I mean when I say that. Like, you might think of the corsets, you might think of the pearl choker. It has a very distinct brand identity and style. And just from a completely fashion perspective, I think it's really sad to see a lot of these brands, which a lot of people who are interested in fashion, who are passionate about style, I think it's quite sad to see a lot of those people rely on these fast fashion brands and really promote these fast fashion brands when they are so void of any personality. They are so void of any style, and they will happily drop a rebrand and jump ship and move to whatever trend there is based on what's going on in the world. Like, fashion deserves more than that. Your style deserves more than that. You deserve more than that. I'm sorry, you have more personality than that. You do, darling, you do. And there'll be a lot of people listening to this who don't give a shit about fashion, they don't give about style, maybe they just dress for comfort or they just wear whatever they can afford. That is absolutely fine. Like, I know that not everyone thinks about fashion in this way, but I do. I really do. And I don't think everyone should think the way I think, but I think if you do have an interest in fashion and style, then you should also feel passionate about this. There's also a third reason why I think this rebrand might have happened, and this is all completely alleged, but just thinking about the current state of the fashion industry, and particularly the fast fashion industry, I do wonder if Pretty Little Thing were struggling to keep up with the likes of like Shein and Temu, and maybe Cider as well, because Shein, Temu, and somewhat Cider, but more Shein and Temu, are able to produce so many garments at such a low price, like even lower than Pretty Little Thing. Like Pretty Little Thing's pricing is crazy cheap, but Shein and Temu are just on another level, and the rate at which they can produce garments and follow trends and create new garments following like a new fashion trend or something like that is absolutely insane. And I do wonder if Pretty Little Thing has basically realised even it has been out fast fashioned. Do you know how crazy it is for Pretty Little Thing to be out fast fashioned? Wild. But I wonder if maybe they've realised that, and instead of trying to compete with these other ultra fast fashion giants like Shein and Temu, maybe they are rebranding because they are trying to become just a force luxury brand. Maybe that is their tactic. Rather than trying to take on these giants head on, they are going the opposite way, and they're trying to almost trick you, convince you that they are something worth investing in. Something you'll see a lot of either like sustainable brands or like luxury brands or forced luxury brands say a lot is they'll refer to their clothes as like investment pieces, which I think we've got way too comfortable throwing that term around in the fashion industry, because an investment piece should be something like a Chanel bag. You know, like that's where the term comes from. But or like, you know, it should be a piece that is, yes, a lot of money, but it's made well. You're going to have it for years and you're going to get your wear out of it. These pieces that they're calling investment pieces are coats that will cost you nearly £200, and it will be 100% polyester. And yes, look, there will be a time when a garment is rightly to be made with polyester. Polyester has its time and its place within fashion. This is not me being like, oh, polyester is bad, because that's not true. But to buy a coat which is just 100% polyester and pay nearly 200 quid for it is absolutely insane. That's not an investment piece. But because they now can't compete with these fast fashion, even bigger fast fashion giants, they are now trying to trick you into thinking that you are purchasing luxury investment pieces when you're not. Something I also think was quite interesting as well is they are very clearly trying to clear a lot of their old stock. So they are very much trying to clear that website. But the whole topic is just absolutely crazy, and there's so many layers to it. That's why I feel like I've gone off on so many tangents here. I'm sorry if the threads have been hard to keep up with. I sometimes do just get a little bit rambly, and I just follow threads that pop up in my brain. But I think more than anything, something that I would just really want to say to people, right, is just because a fashion brand has rebranded itself and is trying to sell you something new, you don't have to rebrand yourself. Look, you don't have to do that at any point in the year. I would hate for people to feel like, and I've felt like this at points in my life, the pressure to rebrand yourself and buy new things and redo your wardrobe. And it's so intense, I think, especially for a lot of younger people who are maybe working their first jobs, who have income for the first time. And, you know, what do you spend it on? Oh, fashion. I think we're in such a cycle of, and maybe it's ironic for me as an influencer to say this, but I do feel like I am worried about so many young things when it comes to our younger people, particularly teenagers and early 20s. But something that does worry me as well is the ease into hyper-consumerism. Because yes, it is nice to, buy yourself nice things, and, everyone should be able to do that. I'm not judging on that, but I think it's like the ease at which we are teaching people to buy so much more than what they need, and probably more than what they really want, to be honest with you. And the normalising of things like Klarna for takeaways and, for like a party outfit and things like that. And obviously there is such an element there of nuance of, people having to use Klarna and things like that. But I think I am worried about the normalisation of it, and like younger people getting into debt, unnecessarily and avoidable debt, so early on in their lives. And I think it is all related to the topic of that pressure of the feeling the need to rebrand yourself and to completely rechange your wardrobe every month or something like that. you don't have to do that. And I think you can have so much more fun with fashion and style when you don't do that. I think you can be constantly building and evolving your style without having to clear out your wardrobe and buy a whole new aesthetic every month. Like, I mean, there's so many ways you can do that, and maybe I'll discuss that in another podcast episode, because I feel like I've really spoken at you today. But you can still play around and have fun with your style and build on your personal style without having to change your wardrobe every month, without having to hyper consume. I really feel like we need to undo this narrative that being interested in fashion is just instantly hyper consumption, because it's not. It doesn't have to be. And there's so many more unique, fun ways to do that are not hyperconsumption. But speaking of consumption, you guys know I like to end the solo episodes by talking about something that I've really enjoyed this week. First of all, program wise, Yellow Jackets is kicking the fuck off. Oh my god, episode 6 was absolutely insane, and I'm literally counting down the days until Friday because I just need to see where it's going to go. I don't want to ruin it for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, but I do feel like it's going to go completely off the rails in like a good way. Like, I think it's about to get batshit crazy. And then music, I have had on, you know it, I've had on The Giver by Chappell Roan on repeat since it came out a week ago. Oh, I just love it so much. It's just such a good song. It's so catchy, and it's just, you know, good day to be a frequenter of the top bunk. And then finishing the podcast in the way that I always do, asking myself, how am I chasing joy this week? I'm actually chasing joy this week by giving myself time in the evenings to play the Xbox, which is a really nerdy 14-year-old boy thing to say, but I have realised that I don't spend enough time at home just chilling. I feel like, especially since launching the podcast, right, I do get such minimal free time, which is fine because it's a project that I set out to do and that I set out to self-produce. So I understood by doing that like I would be sacrificing a lot of time, my free time. But whenever I do get free time, right, I feel the need to go out and do something so that I can say that I've done something and that I'm still being social, or even if it's just going to cinema by myself. And I'm not giving myself enough time at home to just chill out and do nothing. And I'm like, babe, you live in London. Like, chill at home, make the most out of that rent, you know? But I've really realised in the last week how much I've missed that. I had a day on Sunday where I just did nothing all day but lay on the sofa and play the Xbox, because I was in Manchester for work the night before, or the 2 days before, and I came home, did that, and I thought, oh, that was lovely. So I'm trying to give myself at least an hour in the evenings to like just play the Xbox after dinner and like have that time before bed. I think like I really need it for my mental and for my just like well-being. But how are you guys chasing joy this week? I'd generally love to know, because I feel like everyone has their own little way of sprinkling joy into their day, whether that's in like a big or a small way. I just generally love to know. But yeah, I think we'll wrap that up for today. Thank you guys for listening as always. You guys know the drill. If you love this episode, would love if you guys would give the podcast a review. So yeah, review, share with us on socials. I love to see that you're listening. Really, it's a big confidence ego boost for me personally. But yeah, if not, I will see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you then. Bye!